Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson where I'm going to talk about inventions, but I'm also going to talk about some idioms that use the name of that invention in it. So a little bit of a strange lesson possibly, but I think you will enjoy it. If you aren't sure what an invention is, all through time, human beings have been inventing things. Probably one of the first things that was invented was the wheel, and we'll look at a number of those types of inventions through time, and then with each invention, I will teach you an idiom. The first invention I'm going to look at is the wheel. Obviously, you know what a wheel is. You see wheels on almost everything. You see wheels on cars. Cars have four wheels. By the way, we also call the things on a car tires. So there are two names. So you could say that you're going to check if the tires have enough air in them, but you can also refer to them as a wheel. Trains have wheels. Even airplanes that fly in the sky need wheels so that they can land. So the wheel was, I think, one of the greatest inventions of all times. If you've ever used a wheelbarrow, if you are someone who works outside, a wheelbarrow is kind of like a little cart with one wheel on the front and two handles. You'll realize that the wheel is simply an amazing thing that has helped us as a civilization to just do more work in less time. A wheel is round. If you look at this wheel here, the center of the wheel is called a hub, and all of the things that go from the outer part of the wheel to the inner part are called spokes. On a car, a wheel has two parts. It has the tire, and the center part is called the rim. So here's the part where we switch to an English idiom. So in English, we have this kind of funny term, fifth wheel or third wheel. And it depends where you are from, which version of this you use. But what this refers to is when three people are friends, and if two of the people start to become romantically interested in each other, the third person begins to feel like a third wheel or a fifth wheel. I think in every language there is a phrase or a term for this. But as we have the really cool invention, the wheel, we also have a number of phrases that use the word wheel, and one of them is fifth wheel or third wheel. In my part of Ontario, Canada, I have heard both phrases, and you would say it like this. You know, I was really good friends with Jack and Julie, and the three of us used to do lots of things together, but now Jack and Julie are dating, so when we go out, I feel like a third wheel, or I feel like a fifth wheel. Third wheel is probably the more common of the two ways to say it, but basically what it means is if you picture a bicycle with two wheels, and then if you add a third wheel, it just seems odd. So when you have a group of people and people in the group start to maybe become more than friends, remember in our lesson on friendship, we talked about the phrase more than friends, you might start to feel like a third wheel. It's not a nice feeling to feel like a third wheel, but it does happen from time to time because sometimes people start to like each other. By the way, I'm not going to talk about who invented each item or what country invented it, because I thought that might cause fights in the chat. People might start arguing about who invented each of these things. But you can hear as I'm talking, I'm using the word invention to refer to the thing that someone thought up a long time ago. And I'm using the verb invented. So someone obviously invented sliced bread. My understanding is a long time ago, bread was just a loaf and you would just take a chunk off. But at a certain point, someone decided to slice it. Once you slice bread, you can take the slices and make sandwiches. So we always buy sliced bread. It's really easy to put sliced bread in the toaster if you want to toast it. It's just super handy. And that leads to our phrase. The phrase that I'm using today is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So we use this to refer to any newer invention that's just amazing. It's an older phrase. It's not used a lot anymore, but I have heard it a couple of times in the last week. So let's say you're thinking about your smartphone. I don't have mine here. You could say, I love my smartphone. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So for some reason, maybe just to be funny, we refer to sliced bread as the greatest invention of all times. I'm not sure it is. I think the internet might be the greatest invention of all time, but we use this to refer to things that are really, really cool and really, really helpful. The next invention is the telephone. So the telephone obviously is something that has changed a lot over time. I know in old movies, when they use the telephone, they put something up to their ear and then they talk into another thing. I think sometimes they even have a crank on them. But the modern telephone, I think, has been in all of our homes for our entire lives. My grandparents, when they were young, did not have telephones. So even though it seems like a relatively normal thing to have, it is somewhat of a recent invention in terms of human history. The telephone allows you to phone people. Notice we've shortened the word. I don't often say, oh, I'm going to telephone my brother tonight. That just doesn't work. I would say I'm going to phone my brother or I'm going to call my brother. So the telephone, cool invention. I don't know if you guys want to start voting on what is the best invention of all time, but certainly the telephone is really cool. And there are a lot of phrases that come from the word telephone. I picked the one phone tag because it's probably the most common one that I hear right now. Phone tag is when you phone someone and they're not available, so you leave a message. They listen to your message later in the day, and then they phone you, but you're not available, so they leave a message. And then you listen to their message, and then you phone them and leave a message. And then they listen to you, and we call that phone tag. Phone tag is then when you're trying to get a hold of someone, but you constantly get their answering machine instead, and you leave a voicemail or you leave a message. That's how we talk about that. So phone tag is interesting because I don't often phone people anymore. I'm not sure what your preferred method of communication is. The telephone years ago was the preferred method of communication. If you wanted to talk to someone, you phoned them or you gave them a call. Nowadays, I tend to send text messages and sometimes email. That's probably my primary method of communication. Brent in the chat says the best invention, no doubt, is the flushable toilet. I don't actually have that on my slides, Brent, but that certainly is an amazing invention. Years ago, people didn't even have bathrooms in their homes. They had an outhouse, so you had to go outside to use the bathroom. I'm not sure what that would have been like in the winter. Probably not very fun. The next invention is the camera. So a long time ago, we had cameras that took film, and you needed to put film in the camera so that you could take a picture. So for those of you that are just joining us and you're wondering, how is this an English lesson? It's important to listen to the phrases I choose to use when I'm talking about each item, because there's actually a lot to learn in the descriptions I'm giving. So for instance, with cameras, you use a camera to take a picture. When we used to put film in the camera, we would then need to get the film developed. And once the film was developed, you could see whether the pictures turned out. These days, everything is a lot faster. With digital cameras, you can take a picture and you can immediately look at the picture to see if it turned out good. So again, when you check if something turned out, you're simply looking to see if it's good. Is it in focus? Do you like the lighting in the photo and all of those kinds of things? So the camera, an amazing invention. Cameras also take different lenses. You might have a camera where you cannot remove the lens, but some cameras have interchangeable lenses. So you can put different lenses on the camera for different kinds of photographs. So anyways, the camera used to take pictures, also used to take photos. We often use the word picture and photo interchangeably. So a lot of times I'll say, hey, I took a really good picture, or took a really cool picture of Oscar today. I'll send it to you. We don't often say, I took a really cool photo of Oscar, but we do use the word still quite a bit. The phrase I chose from the invention of the camera is the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this phrase simply means exactly what you think it means. Sometimes when you are trying to explain something to someone either in a conversation or in writing, you have to use a lot of words to get your meaning across. You have to use a lot of words so that they can understand what you are talking about. But sometimes if you can just show them a picture, it's worth 1,000 words. So you can see here, this is a picture of the Horseshoe Falls in Niagara Falls. If I wanted to describe the Horseshoe Falls to you in writing, it would probably take many, many words. I would need to say it's shaped like a horseshoe. A horseshoe is the thing that people put on the feet of horses, and it's this shape. Notice I'm already trying to use images to communicate it. But if I show you a picture, you immediately know what the Horseshoe Falls looks like. So we have a phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, simply because, yes, pictures are just a much easier way to explain what something looks like. Let's do a few more. The telescope. So the telescope was invented so we could look at the heavens. Notice I used the word heaven. So in religion, people sometimes talk about heaven and hell. But we also talk about the night sky sometimes as the heavens. So the telescope was a device that was invented so that we could look at things really, really far away. You might also know what binoculars are. Binoculars are similar to a telescope, but there are two, not sure what they're called. There's two viewing things beside each other. I'm not a binocular expert, but the telescope was invented so we could get a closer look at the moon and the stars and all of the things that we see in the night sky. So you'll notice with telescope, I did not have a phrase to teach you, but here's a microscope, and I do have a phrase for this one. The microscope was invented it's similar to the telescope, but instead of looking at things far away, the microscope is used for looking at things that are really, really small. If you went to high school and had a science class, you most likely had microscopes, and you most likely used microscopes to look at maybe the cells of your skin. You might have used the microscope to, maybe you poked your finger and put a little bit of blood on the slide. Microscopes have slides, and then you put it in the microscope, and then you would look through the microscope to see what was on the slide. So the microscope is used to look at things that are really, really small. We have an English phrase to put something under the microscope. So let's say the police think you might be committing crimes. They might put your life under the microscope for a bit. All this phrase means is that someone is paying very close attention to something. So when you put something under the microscope, or you put someone under the microscope, it means you're watching them very closely to see what they do. Maybe you cheated on your taxes. So in Canada, you have to file your taxes every year. You have to tell the government how much money you made, and then they tell you how much tax you owe. But maybe you lied or cheated. The government might put you under the microscope for a year. They might ask to see all of your financial records to see if you have been cheating or not. The next invention is the light bulb. Of course, if we did not have light bulbs, I would look more like this. There we go. Oh, my camera's adjusting now. Whoa, that was quite bright. But if we did not have light bulbs, we would not be able to do things at night. Many, many years ago, people simply had fires in their fireplace, and maybe they had some lanterns in their house. Maybe they used candles to light their homes. But eventually the light bulb was invented. And because of electricity, people were able to do more things at night. I think the light bulb is incredibly important, especially in Canada, where it gets dark really early in the winter. So you'll notice in some of my videos, if I'm out late at night in the summer, it's still quite sunny. But if you go outside at night in January, like by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's already starting to get dark. So the light bulb has really changed the world. And of course, just a quick little note, there are incandescent light bulbs. That's the older style. There are fluorescent light bulbs. Those are the kinds that are long tubes. And now most of our light bulbs are LED light bulbs. So we kind of have innovated quite a bit along the way with light bulbs. So here's the phrase for light bulb. When you say a light bulb went on in my head or a light bulb went off in my head, there's two versions of it. They mean the same thing. It means you had an idea or you suddenly solved a problem you were thinking about. Okay. So let's say I needed to go to the grocery store and the post office and to the restaurant after work, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do that all at once. And then maybe a light bulb goes on in my head or a light bulb goes off in my head. And I think I can drop my son off at the restaurant. He can order food. Then I can go and buy the things I need to and pick them up later. So when you say a light bulb went off in my head, or when you say a light bulb went on in my head, it simply means you had a good idea or you thought of a solution to a problem. So that's how that would work. The printing press. There's probably going to be some inventions I don't mention, but I think this one is incredibly important. Okay. Before the invention of the printing press, everything needed to be written by hand with a pen or maybe a quill. They used to use a feather, right? And you would dip it in ink. But eventually the printing press was invented, and this allowed us to publish things like newspapers, to publish things like pamphlets were very popular. The printing press was the beginning of the spread of knowledge in the world in a much easier way. We would say that it was the beginning of the modern world, I think, was when the printing press was invented. And then the phrase I have for printing press is hot off the press. This is an old phrase. We don't use it as much anymore. But when you say something is hot off the press, it means the news you are sharing is very, very current. Okay, so if you say, hey, I just read this, it's hot off the press, it simply means that it's news that just happened. Okay, so if the president of the United States announced that he was not running for re-election, if that was news that just happened, you would say it was hot off the press. Vaccines. So if we were going to talk about some of the most important inventions, I would say vaccines are incredibly important. Vaccines are something that help you build immunity to a disease so that you don't get the disease. If there was a vaccine right now for coronavirus, I would want to get it. Okay. I know they are testing vaccines right now in the world. You're probably hearing that on the news quite often. Many different countries have gotten close to having working vaccines and are in early stages of testing them. So vaccines are usually created in a laboratory or in a lab, and then you get a vaccine injected, and then it makes you immune to something like a disease. So every year I actually get the flu shot. That is a vaccine that stops me from getting certain strains of the flu. By the way, the flu, in the winter, you either get the flu or you get a cold. Those are the two most common illnesses in the winter here. And no specific phrases for this one, but I do want to share this. When you get a shot, okay, so you saw earlier, here's a needle. When they put it in your arm or in the cheek of your butt, wherever you're getting the shot, we call it a shot. Okay, sounds kind of funny, but the nurse gives you a shot. That's how we say it. And these are the two phrases that they most often say. They say, "This won't hurt a bit," which isn't true. It actually does hurt a little bit, but they'll say, "Okay, roll up your sleeve. This won't hurt a bit." And then they usually wipe your shoulder with a little bit of an alcohol swab to disinfect it, and then they give you the shot. And usually they say this won't hurt a bit, or they'll say you're just going to feel a little pinch. So a pinch is when you go like this. So what they're saying is that when the needle goes in, it will feel the same as if someone's pinching you. I think the second phrase is actually more truthful than the first one. when you say this won't hurt a bit, I don't feel like that's totally truthful. Let me get to the next one here. The automobile. So when you talk about great inventions, and someone asked earlier what I think the most important invention was, I think it's hard to say because so many inventions are so important. The automobile obviously is another invention that changed the world. It changed the world in the sense that you could now drive and visit people who were far away. Instead of taking a horse and buggy, you could just jump in your car and you could drive there. The automobile allowed people to live further away from where they worked. So it allowed cities to have areas like suburbs and subdivisions where people live outside the city and then they drive into the city to go to work. When you drive from outside the city into the city, it's called a commute. You are called a commuter, and you would say, yeah, I commute to work every day. So when you commute, you can also take the subway or the train, but generally in North America, many people drive to work every day. So the automobile, I would say, let's say it's in the top 10. It's one of the top 10 most important inventions. And then let's say here, oh yeah, this is the phrase I chose, to put the pedal to the metal. So you can see the speedometer in this car is at 190 kilometers per hour. That is very, very fast. If it's at 190 miles per hour, that's incredibly fast. But in a car, you have a gas pedal and you have a brake pedal. When you push the gas pedal all the way to the floor, the car goes really fast. And in English, there's this funny phrase to talk about that. We say that you're putting the pedal to the metal. So if you're in a car and you're the passenger and the person isn't driving fast enough, you can say, come on, I'm in a hurry, put the pedal to the metal, which doesn't mean to put it all the way to the floor, but it does mean that you want them to speed up. The other phrase we say is to floor it. So if you're in a hurry and you're not driving, you could say, come on, floor it. I need to get to work on time. So floor it means to push the gas pedal all the way to the floor. The next invention is the clock. By the way, before there was a clock, I think we just looked at the sun. I have no idea how people knew what time it was when it was a cloudy day. Like today, the sun is behind the clouds. But eventually someone invented the clock. Interestingly enough, when the clock was invented, most people only had a clock tower in their town. And if you lived way outside of the town, if you couldn't hear the bells from the clock tower, you wouldn't know what time it was. So very interesting. People had hourglasses, right? So it's sand, and then the sand would fall through the hourglass. But the clock, I think, is a pretty cool invention. Key Park says, internet is the greatest invention in the world, I think, so that we can learn English with Bob from all over the world. It is certainly a cool invention for sure. Let's see here. Brent says he works with a teacher named Susan. She's not lazy at all. Thanks, Brent. And then there were many phrases related to clocks. And the one I chose was the phrase around the clock. Because we have light at night and because we can function 24 hours a day, we now have the phrase around the clock. You can use this literally. Like if you worked for 24 hours straight, you could say, I worked around the clock. But we usually use this kind of figuratively to exaggerate when we're really busy. So you could say, oh, I've just been working around the clock. So I had a really busy week. I worked from about 7 a.m. till about 8 p.m. every day this week. So even though I didn't literally work 24 hours a day, I could use this phrase to say, oh, I'm really tired. I've been working around the clock. Okay. You can also say that a store is open around the clock. Okay. So that's why I picked the open 24 hours. But when something is open around the clock, it simply means it's open all the time. If you say that you work around the clock, it means that you're working quite a bit. The refrigerator. Sorry, my nose is just a little bit itchy right now. I don't want to scratch my nose. It's rude to pick your nose on screen. I don't pick my nose. Okay. Only kids pick their nose. Refrigerator. So a long time ago, there was no way to keep food cold. Maybe you put your food in a stream. I don't know. Eventually people would, in winter countries that have winter, they would cut large blocks of ice in the summer or in the winter months and store them so they could use them in the summer as ice blocks. But eventually someone invented the refrigerator, a great invention that we do not often think about. The fact that we can go buy fresh food, we can bring it home and stick it in a refrigerator. And the refrigerator is the central part of my home. It is the item it is the thing in my home that gets opened the most, I think. So we ended up, I thought, oh, there's a number of different phrases related to fridge, but I thought I would talk about fridge magnets because this is something that was inadvertently invented. A fridge magnet is something that is magnetic. So a magnet will stick to something that is metal. So the door of the fridge door in many homes is a place where people put things, and they usually put it there with a fridge magnet. So a fridge magnet is a magnet usually from, like, these are probably all from different companies. But on our fridge, sometimes we'll put a note on the fridge door and we'll put a fridge magnet on it to hold it there. So fridge magnets are very, very cool. Something that didn't exist before fridges existed. Batteries. So batteries are used to store electricity. I actually don't have electricity on this list as an invention because I think it's more of a discovery. Okay, so when you discover something, it means it already exists and you just figured out how to use it or what it is. But when you invent something, you actually create it. So I would say that a long time ago, electricity was discovered, and that because of that, people eventually created batteries. So batteries have a positive and negative side. So I'm not sure you can see the fly trying to learn English from me. And batteries have also allowed us to have a modern world because it allows us to have electricity in remote places. I chose the phrase to recharge your batteries. So sometimes we pretend that humans have batteries. At the end of a long day, sometimes if I had a hammock, I should buy one. That's a hammock. I would lay in the hammock just to recharge my batteries. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, I'm not doing a live English lesson because I just need a day where I can recharge my batteries. I need a day where I don't talk. I need a day where I can relax. I need a day where I can spend some time with Jen and the kids, and I just need to recharge my batteries. So sometimes we pretend that humans have batteries and we say that we need to recharge them. Let's see here. Paper. So paper was invented a very, very long time ago, and it allowed us to write things down. Before we had paper, before we had different ways to record knowledge, people simply needed to communicate knowledge to the next generation orally. They literally needed to sit around and tell someone how to do something. Paper and all of the things before paper that we could write on, I'm sure there were many things before actual paper, allowed us to record our knowledge. And then I chose this phrase, even though it's not directly related to paper, it kind of is. We have a phrase that the pen is mightier than the sword. So what this means is that when nations fight, when there is war, they do that to solve disagreements between them. But instead of war, sometimes or most times, if you can just communicate, you could probably solve your problem without having to fight with each other. So when we say this as well, we mean that if you wanted someone to think, oh, look at that. My finger just got stuck in my microphone. One sec here. I was not expecting that to happen. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm not waving at you. I'm trying to get the fly to stop bugging me. If I write a letter to the fly and ask him to stop bugging me, it's not going to work. In this situation, this phrase is not true. But often communicating and using words to solve issues is better than fighting. The bicycle. So before the automobile, there were several ways to get around in the world. I think the bicycle is one of the coolest inventions because it does not pollute. You just simply use your own power to pedal the bike, and you use the bike to go various places. I'm amazed at how much easier it is to bike somewhere as opposed to walking somewhere. And it's about the same amount of energy. So if I need to go ask my neighbor a question, it's actually a kilometer or two down the road. Sometimes I just jump on my bike and I will bike to my neighbors. Okay, so notice how I'm talking about biking there. Some people use cycle, but we often just say bike. My kids like to bike around in the driveway. All of my kids have bikes and they love to bike. So I've just used bike in a number of different ways there. Let me see where I am here. Okay. And then we have a phrase in English. We say it's like riding a bike. We use this phrase when we're talking about something that once you learn how to do it, you don't forget how to do it. So there are some things where when you learn how to do it, you can quickly forget how to do it. But there are other things that once you learn how to do it, we say it's like riding a bike. because once you learn to ride a bike, you don't usually forget how to ride a bike. So there are simple things in life, like if I show one of my kids how to fry an egg, they're not going to forget how to fry an egg. So I could say, hey, it's really easy. I'll show you how to fry an egg. After I show you, you'll have no problem doing it yourself. It's like riding a bike. Okay. So the phrase, it's like riding a bike, simply means that it's something that you find easy to remember and easy to do later again. Television. So television has kind of changed in the last little while. It's not what it used to be. When I was a kid, we would sit down at night and watch television. We would have, I think we had 10 channels, maybe 11, and we would look in the TV guide to see what was going to be on, and then we would watch television. Nowadays, people still watch television, but they also watch Netflix and they watch YouTube. So watching things like videos has changed quite a bit. So television is a cool invention. Before television, there was radio, and people would just listen, but eventually they figured out how to send moving pictures, I guess, and you had television. And this created something called the TV dinner. So the TV dinner, we still use this word, even though people don't always eat these in front of the TV. But if you go to the frozen food section of a grocery store, there is a number of TV dinners. A TV dinner is a frozen meal that you can quickly heat up in a microwave and then eat. They're not very tasty. They're not very healthy. We do not buy TV dinners. We probably would call them frozen dinners now. I think TV dinner is an older phrase. Maybe Brent can let us know in the chat whether people still call these TV dinners down in the United States. Let me just check something here. Someone is mentioned. There we go. Yeah, I'm not sure. We would call them frozen dinners, but they are definitely TV dinners. They're meant to heat up quick and then eat in front of the TV. And then here we go. This is actually the last slide of the lesson. It's for airplane. So we earlier had someone mentioned, who do you think actually invented the airplane? That's a tricky one because different people in different parts of the world were working on a machine that could fly at the same time. I think some of the most successful early flights were by the Wright brothers, but I don't want to say they invented it. I definitely know they made some huge leaps forward in flying a machine through the sky. I think they actually called them flying machines before they called them airplanes. The airplane has also changed the world. Okay. The airplane has allowed people to visit other countries a lot more easily, to go on vacations in places where they never would have been able to before. Before the airplane, everyone needed to just go on a boat or a ship. If I wanted to visit Europe 150 years ago, I would have needed to take a ship or a boat. Now I can just jump on an airplane and I'm there in 6 hours. So the airplane, and then the phrase I chose for airplane is the phrase red eye. Red eye is how we refer to a flight that is at night. Okay. So I actually heard this word just the other day at my work. Someone had gone out west to visit family and they came back on a red eye. So when you call it a red eye, it's simply a flight that leaves in the evening and usually lands in the evening. So instead of flying during the day, you fly at night.